went into it not only to be a florist, which of course I became, but I went into it to try and build a business. So that's why 6 months after I bought the first shop, we opened a second shop.
Jim McCann is a pioneer who revolutionized the flower industry. From a small flower shop in New York to founding 1-800-Flowers, he transformed how people buy and send gifts.
I wanted to force myself to build a company, but we're not at my dream point yet. We're still going. We still have a ways to go. I kept my full-time job when I bought the flower shop. I didn't have any savings or assets. It was important to me that I'd be able to pay the mortgage. So if I was awake, I was working. But I realized there was no economy in owning a bunch of flower shops. I had 40 flower shops when I realized, hey, this isn't really working out that well.
In 1986, he made a bold move, purchasing the 1-800-Flowers number, setting the stage for nationwide expansion. By the early 90s, he was ahead of the curve, making 1-800-Flowers one of the first retailers online through CompuServe, AOL, and later 1-800-Flowers.com.
Still learning every day, which is it's all about relationships. And you don't have a relationship with a group of 10. You have 10 individual relationships. It took a while for me to get that.
Today, as executive chairman, Jim continues to shape the brand's future. He's an investor, speaker, and minority owner of the New York Mets. This episode is about vision, innovation, and taking bold risks.
Successful, not just defined as business success, but our journey in life is always trying to be our best self. Work is a lot more than a paycheck. It's also very, very social.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network, but HubSpot doesn't just have great podcasts. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a builder, they've got your back. Now, why is that important? Because if you're building anything, you know that marketing in 2025 is absolutely wild. Now, why is that important? Because you know if you're an entrepreneur, if you're building anything, marketing in 2025 is wild. Savvy customers spot fake messaging instantly. Anything AI generated, they sniff it out. Privacy changes make ad targeting a nightmare, and everyone needs more content now than ever. And that's why you have to have HubSpot's new marketing trends report. It doesn't just show you what's changing, it shows you exactly how to deal with it. Everything's backed by research, but focused on marketing plays that you can use for your business tomorrow. If you're ready to turn marketing hurdles into results for your business, go to hubspot.com/marketing to download it for free. A huge shout out to Lingoda for supporting today's episode. Now, if you're ready to master a new language, Lingoda is the online language platform trusted by over 100,000 students worldwide. Lingoda offers live classes with real teachers available 24/7. You can choose from German, English, business English, French, Spanish, or their newest edition, Italian. What sets Lingoda apart? The smallest class size in the market. It's just you and up to 5 other students. Or if you want, you can go one-on-one for personalized attention. Their native level teachers don't just teach language, they share culture too, and you'll speak confidently from day one. With Lingoda's flexible scheduling and proven curriculum, students report being able to navigate real conversations in weeks, not years. And if you're using Lingoda for business, their CEFR aligned courses ensure that you're learning internationally recognized language standards that employers value. Between sessions, you're going to reinforce your skills with downloadable materials and bite-sized practice exercises. And all Success Story listeners, they put together a special deal. Try Lingoda free with 3 group classes or 1 private class. Plus, you save on any course with my link try.lingoda.com/successstory and code SCOTT25. Don't miss this chance to transform your life through language learning. Today's episode is brought to you by Vanta. Now, listen up. This matters for your business. In today's digital landscape, security isn't optional, it's essential. Without it, deals stall, sales cycles stretch on, and scaling becomes very difficult. Now, why? Because investors, customers, and partners all expect businesses to demonstrate strong security practices before they commit. If you can't prove trust, you lose opportunities. So whether you're a startup founder trying to land that first big client or an established company scaling your security program, Vanta helps businesses of all sizes prove that they're trustworthy by automating compliance across 35 frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA, the exact certifications your prospects are demanding. Here's why you need to pay attention. Vanta gives you back precious time that you're currently wasting on compliance. Their platform automates up to 90% of the tedious compliance work. It helps you respond to those endless security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and it connects you with experts to get your security program running immediately. The results speak for themselves. A recent IDC report found that Vanta customers achieve over $535,000 per year in benefits, and the platform pays for itself in just 3 months. So you're going to join over 10,000 global companies like Atlassian, Cora, and Factory who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. And don't miss this. For a limited time only, my listeners can get $1,000 off Vanta. That's real money back in your pocket. Visit vanta.com/Scott right now before this offer expires. That is VANTA.com/Scott. When you bought your first flower shop, if you go back to that moment in time, you invested $10,000 into that first shop. Did you have any idea in your mind about how big this was going to get?
Yes. I hoped, I dreamt, but we're not at my dream point yet. We're still going. We still have a ways to go. So yeah, I went into it not only to be a florist, which of course I became, but I went into it to try and build a business. And so that's why 6 months after I bought the first shop, we opened a second shop, because I wanted to force myself to not just run a good shop, it's to build a company. It looked to me like there was no real powerful player in a flower shop, in the florist business. I thought there was an opportunity to build a bigger company.
And you had the foresight way back then to see the opportunity. I mean,
I wouldn't give myself any credit for seeing the opportunity. There just wasn't a big player. I found out why. It's hard. And, you know, I kept my full-time job when I bought the flower shop because I had, you make decisions. I married very young. We started a family very young, and that has consequences. You're not as risk tolerant. And I didn't have any savings or any assets. So it was important to me that I'd be able to buy groceries and pay the mortgage. So I kept my full-time job and hired people to run the flower shops. So if I was awake, I was working. Not much has changed, by the way, but the kind of work I was doing then is different now, and different from what I do now. And it's a lot more fun now, but it was, really hustling, opening up shops and always making the last delivery when no one else wants to. You'll do it on the way home, and 2 hours later, you're finally rolling home. But it worked out. But I realized there was no economy in owning a bunch of flower shops. There was no economies of scale. In fact, maybe the opposite. And so I said, I have 40 flower shops now. And when I realized, hey, this isn't really working out that well.
So, I mean, to get to even 40 flower shops, it's still impressive. So something is working. But when you were thinking big, you were thinking
nationwide.
So what was the friction that you figured out was the issue with flower shops? And maybe not even just flower shops, maybe just talk about, like, to the audience, a broader lesson about business opportunities and friction and what's scalable and what's not. Because I think that, do you know Paul Graham? So Paul Graham, the famous article, you do things that don't scale and you figure out how to make them scale. It's very romantic and it's a very nice idea. But more often than not,
doesn't talk about the roadkill.
Yeah, exactly. exactly.
And in that case, there's a reason why flower shops are very often, family businesses. Uncle Joe, who works for Pfizer, the big chemical company, doesn't take his personal day, his one personal day a year, or one of his 2 personal days a year, a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so that he can deliver flowers for his cousins who own the flower shop, unless it's family, and he wants to be invited for Thanksgiving dinner. And that's what the strain on flower shops is. You have peaks and valleys of business. So that's why the family businesses, who else will work that hard? Who else can you be sure is going to be there and work on those key weeks and months or weekends that are very, very busy? So it's tough to go because your business will go 10x. 1 week, 10 times as busy the next week. That's hard to manage.
Well, it's stressful. And then I'm assuming that a lot of stuff breaks when you have those 10x periods. Okay, so 40 flower shops in. What was the light bulb moment that allowed you to say, okay, so this is not what I signed up for is not what I'm getting, or maybe I was too ignorant to even understand what I was signing up for at the time.
Yeah, pretty much.
How do I take this and systemize it and build a real business around it?
I think we were learning our way into what you do in a shop and what you do outside of a shop, because a retail flower shop is complicated in this sense. You're paying a lot of money to be in a retail location where there's traffic. But the majority of the business is behind the curtain. It's the back room, which is where you're really doing the work, where you're designing and making your product and prepping your product. And so you're paying retail rents for warehouse kind of work. And some people who've been successful around the country have figured out how to separate that. So I had to pull out of that retail flower shop, that bulk heavy work, put it someplace else, and allow the flower shop to focus on their retail business, their walk-in business, have it nicely merchandised, because you have a good-looking shop, and then the holiday comes, and you crush it because you need every square inch of the building to. So it's realizing that you have a manufacturing distribution business and a retail business all in the same location, paying retail rents when you don't really need to. So we've started to find efficiencies of taking that kind of work out of the shop, having production facilities that could do it efficiently and do it for 10 shops at a time.
Did you come from an entrepreneurial background at all?
I wouldn't say entrepreneur, I'd say small business. And I think there's a difference. My dad was a painting contractor. So his dad before him was too. So I grew up around that business a lot. When I was a kid, my father thought old enough to walk, old enough to work. And my grandmother inherited the business when her husband died at 48 years old. And she made my father in charge of the business at 21 or so, just out of the Navy, to say, okay, you run the business, because I'm not going to take some little 5-foot-tall Irish lady in. She's going to boss around 25 men or so. So she made my father the boss. And so I was around it all the time. Her kitchen table was the boardroom. So I heard a lot about business. And so I worked in a lot of small businesses, mostly retail. So yes, small business background, not entrepreneurial. In fact, when I first started in this business, entrepreneurial word wasn't used very often.
I know now it's
only in the last generation.
It's true. Because you had an interesting, I would say you had a lot of interesting experiences. So also another experience in your life, in your backstory was the group home experience as well. And I'm trying to figure out and tell a little bit about that experience and how it impacted you as well. But I'm trying to figure out, and I always like to do this, what are the experiences that lead to your success? And all these experiences obviously impact how you think, how you operate,
who we are.
Do you feel like that small business experience from your parents, your grandparents, do you feel like the group home experience, what do you think was the most impactful?
I couldn't say which was most, both extremely impactful. So growing up around a small business has a big impact. On my mother's side, her stepfather was he ran speakeasies. And then when it was legitimate, he ran bars and restaurants. So I was around that. I heard all of that all the time. And my father's business was a painting business. So I heard about that all the time. Customers, estimates, problems, challenges, all the things that small business people have to deal with. But from a personal development point of view, getting that first job in a group home as a live-in counselor was hugely impactful on who I am, how I thought about things, and developing my confidence, self-confidence. So it had a huge impact on me. And frankly, the things I learned working with those 10 kids, by the way, kids, I was 6 months older than the oldest one when I started the job, had a huge impact on me.
Explain what?
Well, you really learn about yourself. Here I am, 21 years old, and I became my father. I found myself saying the same things that I said, never said
to these kids. They were only a couple months younger.
Well, that was just the one. I had them from 14 to 20 years old. And if you're in any way inconsistent, they will let you know. If you show any kind of fear, it will take advantage of that. So these were tough kids. They came from horrible circumstances. And I learned a lesson I'm still learning every day, which is it's all about relationships. And an important lesson I learned, because I really wasn't very good at this work, especially in the beginning, I learned to be better at it. And I think I learned to be good at it, but it was because I had good mentors, good role models to learn from and watch and observe. And I really had a passion for it. So I worked hard to get better at it. And the key I learned was relationships. And you don't have a relationship with a group of 10. You have 10 individual relationships. And it took a while for me to get that. I tried to herd this crowd.
You try and bulk. You try and, group them together. Yeah. And you're like, I'm going to have one leadership style. Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of similarities in what you're dealing with in this group home and what people deal with their companies or teams or whatever.
That's what I learned. I didn't realize I was learning that, but that's exactly, Scott, what I learned, which is the management skills I learned to keep kids out of trouble and doing well in life and going to school and growing. The same skills I've been using the rest of my life in anything I've been involved in any workplace, for profit, not for profit. It's all about helping people to set goals, measure things, convince them that they can achieve things they didn't think they could achieve, teach them to work in teams, creating currencies that help you to reward things and incite others to do things, and how to show recognition. And so the things I learned working in that group home and then later running all the group homes and then running the home for boys. So we had a main campus with about 175 boys and then group homes of 10 boys each. But as a young person, you get a disproportionate amount of responsibility if you're willing to step up and take it, because it doesn't pay well. So it doesn't attract a lot of people who can do it for a career. Now, where I worked, there were many people who did it for a career, and God bless them, because it was hard work and they were good people doing good work.
You mentioned something that's really interesting. So when you have a group of people that you're trying to influence or lead or do really anything with, each one of those people, that's a personal relationship. It can't be a group relationship. How does that, because I'm assuming that idea has sort of been a really important idea in all the companies you've built, in all the teams you've led, in all the customers you've served. So that idea, well, you don't have relationships with groups, you have relationships with individuals. How do you scale that?
I think it's quite easy in concept. That is, people, you can't have relationships. We have 5,000 people who work in the flowers companies now. And Harry and David brand, the 1-800-Flowers brand, Cheryl's our cookie brand, Schaffenberger, our newest chocolate brand. So 5,000 people all in. So I don't have relationships with 5,000 people, but the people I do know and have relationships know that they're genuine relationships. And I encourage them to have relationships with their people. And so you and I were chatting earlier about the changing place of media. And to run a company, you have to be at least media savvy or media sensitive, because you only have a few ways of communicating what's important to you. So every group home had a culture. Every office, department in the main agency had a culture. It's different. There was one culture for the whole place, but we can't control that culture. The best we can do is influence it. And as business operators or managers, we have a few dials available to us to influence the culture. So we're cultural engineers, but we cannot control it. So how we role model what we want to see, who we hire, who we don't, how do we reward people and how, what do we tolerate, what don't we tolerate? All of those things are signals that influence our culture. Again, we can't control it, but you can signal. So I think some of the business leaders I follow and most respect are really good at managing the message. I think of people in the public eye like a Jamie Dimon, who runs JP Morgan, brilliant at simplifying things and letting people know there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way. And he won't tolerate the wrong way. And but he has 260,000 people who work in his organization. He can't possibly know them. He'll never even see most of them, but they know him and they have a sense of what his compass is, his moral compass. And it's effective use. He has to be effective in using media to get his message out because he has those 260,000 people all over the globe.
When you know your core culture that you want to create and you can influence, then there's a downline of people building individual relationships with each member on their team through the lens of that culture that you're championing and disseminating and communicating. I think that's very important. I think that that's really the best way to influence 260,000 people, or we're talking internal, even building relationships with their customers. I mean, every customer, it's not easy, but every customer should feel like you are building an intimate one-on-one relationship with them. I mean, it always starts from the top.
And vocabulary matters there. You see it every day in terms of really well-run organizations. You look at like a Ritz-Carlton hotel. If you ask someone directions, they won't say, yeah, it's down there. They'll walk you over there. And so there are certain linchpins that are important to maintaining that culture around the globe again, or the fact that they always, if you ask them something, my pleasure. They don't say, oh, thank you. They say, my pleasure. It's all those little signals that says we do things different here because we're different.
When you were building 1-800-Flowers, and then obviously now there's, listen, I have a list of a whole bunch of other businesses that you've now built since, but that is the one that I think you're most well known for. When you were building 1-800-Flowers, what were the things that, because we can talk about the tactics, we can talk about the fact that you had a phone number as a name, which are all interesting stories, I'm sure. We can go into any of them, but you just made a good point. You have to do things a little bit differently. When you look at sort of the legacy that you've built, what are you most proud of having done differently?
I think what helped us to be successful, and it was clearly not a straight line of success.
It never is.
Never is our willingness to say, look, when your name is 1-800-Flowers, you're the first company whose name is its telephone number. It screams convenience. And that's been our mantra ever since the earliest days of founding the business, is to let's be as convenient as we can. The attitude we took was we're counting on people to be thoughtful and to express themselves, and to express themselves with a gift. And in the earliest days, the gift we were peddling was only flowers. So if you want people to be thoughtful and act on that thoughtfulness, you ought to be convenient, because from the idea to the intention to execution is fraught with interruption. And if you're quick and convenient, then you have a better shot at being successful. So that was always our driving influence. And technology was always the thing that we looked to say, how can we use technology to be more efficient, more convenient, more accessible? So when we realized flower shops, limited number of hours, we're open 7 days, of course, but when we first bought the company that had the telephone number in it, we had to take a leap of faith that this new convenience would be important to enough people to make it worthwhile. And I assure you that the people who were already in the floral business didn't think people needed to have an 800 number to call, that they certainly didn't need to do it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And they didn't want to use, we were told they would never use credit cards over the phone. All of which was wrong because it was convenient. And yeah, there are people who work overnight and want to call and order something, or now do it online, or do it on their mobile device more conveniently. And so it was, how do we use technology? So for each step of the way, stores, we never walked away from any of those technologies. What I mean by that is we had stores, we still have stores. We don't own them now, mostly owned by our franchisees, because I had to sell the stores back then to raise capital to fund this idea of building up this brand, 1-800-Flowers.
You were always taking risks then. That's a risky move.
Yeah.
That's a very risky move, because so even at that point, and I think it's important to drop this right now, because obviously this is sort of your most recent work. So you wrote the book Lodestar, which are tapping into 10 timeless pillars of success. And as we sort of walk through your journey, I do want to highlight some of those sort of universal fundamental pillars and how they impacted you. So I think that this is Well, I mean, if you look at risk-taking, evolution, reinvention, disruption, sort of blue ocean ideology, things that I think that you've also sort of alluded to, and even this early part of your story, how important are some of these ideals in success? Are these what you would consider like a core principle, or are these things that worked out for you and may not be the best playbook for another entrepreneur?
I wrote Lodestar with my friend and partner in this journey because I think these are the lessons I've learned that are most important and have been most impactful on my life and the lives of so many other people I know in terms of helping them to be successful. And successful, not just defined as business success, but our journey in life is we're always trying to be our best self. Most people, I think, are trying to be their best self. And I'll tell you the story of Lodestar because it tickles me that this accident happened. So at the very beginning of COVID, which would have been March of 20, we didn't know what was going to happen to our business. All of a sudden, anyone who could work from home not all of them had computers. We didn't have the technology in place. Thank God Zoom was already around, but we hadn't really been using it much. All of a sudden, boom, you got to get people up and running on the network. And we didn't know if anyone was going to order anything from us. And for a few days, they did it. When we first went into lockdown, because people were just too distracted. And then all of a sudden, it was a boom for our business because people couldn't get together. And they wanted to express themselves, and especially in our food businesses like Harry and David and our popcorn factory. You could sell someone a nice big tin of popcorn, 3 different flavors of popcorn in it, and they, especially if they had kids that keep them busy. And
No, I love that. I love that.
so it turned out to be good for business, but in the very beginning, we did not know what the impact would be. So that accelerated a lot of technology changes in our business. But in April of that year, I'm reading an article in Psychology Today written by this professor, psychologist at Johns Hopkins. I thought it was brilliant because, we've already talked about my feeling about the importance of relationships in everything we do. And he was speculating how this lockdown, how this COVID experience would impact our relationships. Major relationships, marital relationships, family relationships, and casual relationships, like not seeing a regular barista who you give a wave to, even if they're not waiting on you, because you developed a little relationship with them. And I thought it was brilliant. So I wrote him a fan letter. I said to Dr. George Everly, I read this piece. I thought this was terrific, but I hope we have occasion to chat someday. So he wrote back to me and said, well, I'd love to chat with you. Why don't we do it? And so we did, and we became friends. And we were working together because at the same time, when business is interrupted like that, I said, what are we going to do with our customers? Are we going to advertise to them and say, hey, if you're in lockdown, we have the perfect gift? I can't do that. So a young lady who was my chief of staff at the time, still with the company, but now she runs marketing for us. She said, well, why don't you just write to our customers and tell them what we're going through, what we're experiencing, how it's impacting us. And so I did that. I wrote a newsletter we put out on Sundays, and I never try and sell anything in that newsletter. But 4.5 years later, I'm still writing that letter, and we now have over 10 million subscribers. And it's all about relationships. I write about it, and now it's interactive. People are writing and asking us questions and beginning. How do I think about how this is impacting a 7-year-old who's not in school now and is too distracted to pay attention to Zoom, and maybe the school hadn't gotten to Zoom classes yet, and I wasn't qualified to answer you. So I built a little network of half a dozen, maybe 8 great scientists, scholars, psychologists. And I asked Dr. George Everly if he would be my first member of what we call the Connectivity Council. And he said, sure, I'd love to. Then we had Dr. Dan Willingham from University of Virginia. We had Dr. Angela Jackson from Harvard. We had Dr. Chloe Carmichael from New York, now from Orlando as well, these just brilliant people. I was so enjoying being able to ask them questions that our community was asking us, and we'd create some webinars over some important topics that people were really interested in. But I really was doing a lot of work with Dr. George. So 2.5 years ago, in Naples, Florida, driving with my wife, phone rings. I answer it on the speaker in the car, and it's George. And I said, Jim, I'm really enjoying this work we're doing, and I think we're doing some really important stuff. He says, I have a suggestion. I said, yeah. He says, why don't you and I do a book together on all this work we're doing around relationships? And I'm thinking, what's the right? This man's brilliant. Write a book with me? And my wife's looking at me like, don't you dare. She might think I'm overcommitted or should be committed, one or the other. And so I said, love to, George. He whacks me in the arm. And so it was over 2.5 years ago, and it started a real long work project, but it was
Not easy to write.
It's not easy, and it's exciting for me because being able to spend that much time with someone who I've already come to like a lot, but now is just so smart. And the work sessions, a few hours at a time, I started recording them because I couldn't keep up with all I was hearing and learning. And he could, by the way, let me tell you a little back on Dr. George. I think the best way to tell you about Dr. George is he had severe ADHD, and he had terrible dyslexia, but not diagnosed. He's a junior in high school in a nice Leave It to Beaver kind of town. He describes it outside of Baltimore in Maryland. And his dad gets a call from the guidance counselor at the high school, calls his dad in and says, George is not going to make it in high school. He's certainly not going to college. So my suggestion is yank him out now and get him a job before his graduating class gets out of here. And they're all competing for jobs. Maybe you can get him a job in the civil service or maybe a factory worker someplace, but he's not a student. He's not that bright. Well, his dad told him that story the day he got his first PhD. And George said to him, Dad, why did you never tell me that story until now? He says, because I didn't want it to become self-fulfilling. So George figured out how to rewire his brain when he talked his way into college and got properly diagnosed and figured out how to rewire his own brain so that he could become a scholar, which he is. He's been teaching at the university level at Johns Hopkins, Harvard for over 40 years. I think he's got 3 PhDs. And he's also a Renaissance man. So he couldn't read a note of music, but his dad was a CPA, so he became an accountant. Then he got an MBA because he wasn't really challenged by the accounting work. His dad was a musician, so he became a musician. He toured with Gladys Knight and the Pips and the Temptations. Can't read or know the music. Wonderful saxophone player. He became a bodybuilder. He was a consultant to the U.S. weightlifting team, improved their weights, won an Olympic over the others by the most that's ever happened using his visualization techniques. And so I get to hang around with this amazing guy who, by the way, Lodestar. I have a copy for you.
Oh, why didn't you should have told me before. I would have put it on the table.
Well, we'll get it out here.
It's interesting how the words are so important, right? Like if you think about, I mean, I didn't even know this story going into this, but if you think about if his dad had just told him that story when he was about to graduate high school, what he would or would not have become.
Would not have. So George, musician, bodybuilder, and made himself an expert in PTSD. So you have first responders. He's been to 40 countries working with public health officials, studying and working with people on big traumas and how society, a community, a family reacts to that. So the big nuclear reactor meltdown in Japan that happened as a result of the tidal wave, George was summoned to come help the government officials there. He studied the impact of the Nazi bombings on London in World War II. So he's an expert on stress, management of stress, and PTSD effects. So he created something called the psychological first aid kit that he developed into a program that's still being taught around the world to first responders on how to handle their stress in terms of what they're going to see and what they're going to deal with. And he's created a whole not-for-profit that does training around the world. So he's a remarkable guy. So long story, Lodestar was an excuse for me to hang around with George for a few years.
I love that.
Learn from him and really, I think, do work that ride his back on the work that we did, which I think is really impactful.
A big thank you to Indeed for supporting Success Story, because hiring people is one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to do as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as somebody who's trying to build a business. It's important to hire well and find the right person, but it takes so much time and it's so labor intensive because, like most entrepreneurs, you have 1,000 things going on and there's a good chance that you just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. So how can you find that great, amazing, right fit candidate fast? It's easy. Just use Indeed, because you don't have to waste time struggling to get your job posts seen on all these other job sites. If you're using Indeed, you can just use their sponsored jobs to help you stand out and hire fast. Your post jumps right to the top of the page for relevant candidates, so you can reach out to exactly who you're looking for faster, and the results really speak for themselves. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. And you know what I love most about Indeed? It really just makes hiring so fast, because everything is streamlined in one place. No more juggling multiple platforms or waiting weeks for the right candidate. And how fast is Indeed? In the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed, and listeners of Success Story will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Clary. Terms and conditions do apply. Just go to Indeed.com/Clary. A huge thank you to NetSuite for supporting today's episode. Now, what does the future hold for business? If you ask 9 experts, you're going to get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market, inflation up, inflation down. Honestly, at this point, you just need a crystal ball. But until we get one, over 41,000 businesses have found the next best thing. They future-proofed their businesses, their operations with NetSuite by Oracle, which is the #1 cloud ERP. Imagine having your accounting, your financial management, your inventory, your HR, all flowing together in one fluid platform. And here's what makes NetSuite different. It gives you one source of truth for your business. You get the visibility and control to make quick, confident decisions while others are guessing. You're working with real-time data, insights, forecasting. You're basically looking into the future of your business with actionable data, whether your company earns a couple million or even hundreds of millions. NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and helps you grab your biggest opportunities. And speaking of opportunities, they put together the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/Scott Clary. This is the playbook for understanding how to use AI for your business. The guide is free. That is netsuite.com/Scott Clary. I mean, you're very gracious. I'm sure you committed and put a lot of yourself into this.
Well, I put time in, and I brought some practical lessons of people I've seen that I think use these techniques effectively. But what we did was, look, I was certainly not going to say that I know everything there is about how we work on self-development, but I've been a student of self-development and self-improvement for a long time. And there's lots of people who I think the world of, who I think are terrific. But I learned working on this project with George that it's a $10 billion a year industry. There are 85,000 books in print on self-improvement, personal development. It's not all good. There's a lot of good, but it's not all good.
Were you ever into this growing up? Were you into self-improvement, self-development? Yeah. The reason I'm asking is because there's different ways to be into it. I mean, you can go to a Tony Robbins event. You can listen to like a Mel Robbins podcast or a Jay Shetty podcast. You read books like this, and you can look at it from like a personal improvement, or there's people that are more, I need the tactics. And I'm curious, just from somebody who's obviously been very successful, what version of self-improvement and self-development worked best for you? And do you think there's a reason why?
Yes. So I was asked to do a speaking tour 20 years ago. Yep, over 20 years ago. And I agreed to do it. It was a 14-city tour. I agreed to do it because the lead on the program was someone I thought the world of. His name was Zig Ziglar, the prince of self-help and personal development. And he was just such a remarkable guy, and I was a fan. I have 3 kids. My wife and I have 3 kids, and if I'd be in a car, I'd often have back then a cassette of his on. The kids swore they weren't listening to it, but they were. Even if they tried not to. You know, it was back before they all had individual devices. And so I agreed to do this tour because it was an excuse to work with Zig, who was a headliner. It's 14 stops, and one of them was in New York, where we live. And we were doing a 20,000-seat arena in New Jersey, and we were doing a 16,000-seat arena on Long Island, the Long Island Coliseum. So Zig was going to be in town, so I said, Zig, I'd love to have you over to the house for dinner. And it was a weeknight, a school night, and it was the night before we were doing the Long Island gig. So my wife and I, 3 kids, and they're teens or young teens at the time, and Zig. So we had dinner early, but 1 o'clock in the morning, school night, they're still up hanging on every word that Zig has to say. They're asking, tell me the Wilma Rudolph story again. Now, they swore they weren't listening, but they knew the stories to ask him. And it's his I thought he was one of the most impactful teachers that I came across before I met George, who had a good and practical lesson. And so many of his teachings are incorporated in these 10 pillars in Lodestar in terms of just managing your time, setting your expectations, willingness to be self-critical. And it's for him, so much of it was attitude. Attitude was everything for him. One story I remember him telling is a fellow walks up to the counter in the airport and checks on his flight and says, oh my goodness, it's going to be delayed 3 hours. And he's ranting, that's ridiculous, you know. And another guy 20 minutes later walks up and hears it's going to be delayed. He looks and he goes, he sits down, he takes out a book and he looks quite happy. And Zig goes over and chats with him and said, well, there's nothing I can do about it. She can't do anything about it. It's not her fault. It's a mechanical problem. It's better they found a mechanical problem on the ground. And yes, it's going to disrupt things, but I could be all upset about it. Or I can say to myself, here's an opportunity. This book I've been traveling with for the last 3 months, and I really haven't had a chance to read it. Here's my chance to sit down quietly in a comfortable place with air conditioning and read this book. And he just pointed out the difference in what your attitude is and your approach. And I learned so much from Zig, and George is the modern day Zig. Zig has passed quite a number of years ago. But in answer to your question, who is impactful for me?
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar.
I love that. When you look at, by the way, what does Lodestar mean?
That star in the sky that guides you, that takes you to where you want to go.
I love that. I've never heard that term before.
It's an old-fashioned term and sort of fell out of disuse. But when George and I were looking at different things we could call it, and we came upon Lodestar, we looked at one another and go, that's it.
I like it.
George says the book named itself.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Well, now people use the term like North Star, but Lodestar, I like that. I'm going to start using that. When you think about, so I want to take it back to when I first brought up Lodestar, you were speaking about some of like your own journey and what was happening at 1-800-Flowers. And now I want to contextualize the question a little bit better that I was asking you, because it's talking about disruption and innovation. Let's look at the question a different way. Out of all the principles, and I know this is an unfair question, but you have to answer and humor me anyways, but out of all the principles, which one was the most impactful for you? What's a story you can tell about one of the principles and how it impacted you when you were building 1-800-Flowers?
I touched on it already in that I said that George was able to rewire his brain when he finally figured out what was the matter with him and why he couldn't read. He made a joke when we finished with the manuscript for the book. We sent it into the publisher, Simon & Schuster, and we did it through Worth Books and Simon & Schuster's distribution partner. And they sent it back to us, said, okay, read, this is the final edited version. Read it very carefully for any last minute changes we have to make. And George just laughed. He said, are you kidding me? You know, you're asking to read this carefully? I can't. But the one lesson I think that jumps to the front of my mind all the time is what George taught me is neuroplasticity. That is, our brains are learning all the time. So whatever we do, our brains are trying to get better at it. So if you're a worrier, or your wife is a worrier, the more she does it, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And if you're nervous about flying, and then you're nervous about getting nervous about flying, you're going to be better at getting nervous at the thought of flying. So the idea is we can reprogram our brains. And if we don't, it's doing it on its own, but it's not going to go in a positive direction. It goes to the easier track, which is to be negative. So what we learned, reading the research, is that less than, let's call it 20% of us are born optimistic. 80% are born to tend to be pessimistic. It's easier to be pessimistic. Our brains sort of go there. It's harder to be optimistic, but optimistic people, that 20%, or the larger percentage that train themselves, teach themselves to be optimistic, have more and better relationships in their life. They do better professionally. They have more friends. They're physically healthier. So in every measurable way, optimists have it better than pessimists. So wouldn't you choose I hope I was born optimistic? Or aren't there things I can and should do to reframe things, like a Tony Robbins will teach you, to think in a more positive vein, paint a picture of where you want to be, and be deliberate about trying to get there. So neuroplasticity, our brains are changing all the time. We ought to be deliberate about how we want them to change, and we ought to exercise, like we would physically, our mental functioning so that we're training ourselves to be more optimistic.
Now, this is something obviously you wrote about and based on the research, but was this something as an entrepreneur that you've done over your life? Because it's not, I think that entrepreneurs are probably tested the most because they have the most opportunities to say, oh my God, life is not going the way that I wanted it to go. There's fires every day. It's very easy to default to pessimism. Not to say that somebody that works a 9-to-5 W-2 does not have opportunities to be pessimistic, but I think that entrepreneurship is very much a roller coaster, and every low point is a new opportunity.
Or scientist.
Yes, exactly. So
they're going to find, it's like, what did Edison say? It took him 1,000 experiments before, or I think it was 10,000 experiments. And he said, no, that's 10,000. It's 10,000 successes because I was learning each of the ways that it didn't work that I could get to the way that it did work. So yes, I think entrepreneurs, small business people, it's easy to be pessimistic because I have lots of evidence that things are going to go wrong.
I was going to say, like this is like an interesting point because, again, you've built not just one business, multiple businesses to a very significant degree. So now like a multi-billion-dollar business. Everything that could have gone wrong probably at some point did go wrong in your life several times. So how did you not default to pessimism?
I wouldn't tell you it's like a light bulb moment. I think I've gotten better at recognizing the signs that I'm going down a wrong path. Not in terms of what I'm doing, but how I'm feeling about it. And by developing with these tools a self-awareness, you say, wait a minute, I got to hit the pause button here. I got to reframe that. And lots of times I'll whip out a pen and a piece of paper because that's how I learn best, by writing. So I'm always taking notes. I'm always writing lists because it's how we frame things is how we'll see them. And if we can envision a brighter day, then we have something to work toward. If it's woe is me, it's never going to work. Guess what? It's not going to work. So it's something I'm still learning. And I'm a lifelong learner. Most of us are. And I would also tell you I'm a better person today than I was yesterday, than I was a year ago or 10 years ago. And I'm trying to be a better person.
I think half of it is when you understand how your brain works, then you're more likely to pay attention to it. That self-awareness is key.
It really is.
If you don't research, if you don't read, if you don't understand how your brain works, I mean, you can just drift through life haphazardly and default to pessimism because you don't even understand that you have to go in one direction or the other. Your brain will never be neutral. It will always go down one road or another. So you have to start to think, okay, now that I know that.
I'm thinking of a story of parents who are going crazy because they have a 7-year-old son who's the most optimistic kid. It's driving him crazy. And the father in frustration says, Christmas is coming. I'm gonna challenge this kid. So he's like a nut. He goes and he piles manure in the kid's floor of his bedroom at night. And the kid gets up in the morning. The father says to the mother, let's see how he makes optimism out of this. And he hears his kid yelling, "Whippy, yippee, yippee." How could he be excited about this? And he goes in and says, what are you happy about? He says, with all this manure around, there's got to be a pony someplace.
I love it. Okay, so when you put this together, let's go through a couple other like key lessons that really impacted you, like when you're putting together this research. And I think that you can sort of describe some other lessons from the perspective of, this is something that if I had known at the time, it would have made my life significantly easier. Because I think this is what these types of books and these types of works do. So that's why I always love just skimming through. Again, when you go down the road and you buy a book like this, you're not just...
Well, see, it's 10 chapters here, Scott.
But you don't just my point is you don't need to incorporate everything at once. The goal is to understand, okay, these are some principles. Let me apply one principle, master that principle, and then my life will become 5 or 10% better. So think of a few that are sort of the most impactful for you over your career. And then we can go down that rabbit hole.
I think for me, I've already spoken about it without identifying it. And that is the benefit of relationships, not only from a social, emotional point of view, but from a learning and resource point of view. I'm self-aware in terms of my own intelligence. I'm a reasonably bright guy, but I'm not the smartest guy in the world. And I learned that I could be self-aware enough to say, I'm excited when I meet really smart people. I made the mistake of going out of my way to expose my kids to these really smart people I was meeting. And it was only several years ago that we were out on a boat and chatting with my two sons. My oldest is a daughter, but 3 of us were in a conversation. And my youngest son, Matt, said to me, Dad, James and I, his older brother, James and I were talking about all the times you dragged us to a dinner or to meet somebody, and it really didn't have the impression on us that you were hoping for. It made us feel less adequate because they're always so smart, they're always so accomplished, and you were so excited by them and to expose us to them that it was actually having the opposite effect in that we were feeling more inadequate. And it wasn't until we matured that we realized that you were comfortable knowing that these people are so much smarter than you. And that was a growth moment for us when we got to the point where we could say, we felt like you, that we could be excited about putting ourselves around people who are much smarter than us. And I've been comfortable with that for a long time, being around, knowing that there are a lot of smart people out there. And I find joy in that because I love to interact with them and learn what I can. And so I think a technique is that I'm always investing in relationships. And I'll give you a practical example. One thing that my kids will tell you that I did right with them is that I always impressed upon them. I'm a shy person in recovery. And overcoming shyness was an important thing for me to do. And I did it because I worked in retail as a kid. And if you want to eat, you have to interact with people. And so I always counseled my kids, and my kids would tell you that I still do it to this day, and they're grown. I have grandkids, but I do it with my grandkids now too. And I do it with the people I work with. We just put on a conference at a Worth Media Group 2 weeks ago called Techonomy, I told you about, Scott. And what I was really proud of is that so many people came up to me and said, your staff goes out of their way to make people feel comfortable. And 2 years ago, we weren't that good at that. And it's with coaching and training and planning with Josh Campbell, who's the CEO of that company, Paul Stimulus is the CEO of our investment company. Them working with our team to say, I don't care if you're shy. you can make believe you're not, because your job is to look for someone in the crowd who doesn't have, they're at the cocktail party and not talking to anybody. They're uncomfortable. Go find them. Grab them by the hand. Be the host. Make sure they're in a conversation. And I was so proud. That was the thing. Content was great. It was a sellout, standing room only. We had great entertainment. It was just all around great day and a half. But what I was most proud of, that people said, your team is remarkable because they go out of their way. And it's not an accident. They go out of their way to make people feel comfortable, feel welcome and included. It starts when they walk into the building and they go to the reception desk, and Kim has a big smile for them and recognizes them, gets their name tag, doesn't say, okay, it's in there, walks them in like she worked at the Ritz-Carlton. And I go out of my way to do that, and have for a long time, and taught my kids, always be the host. Even if it's not your party, if someone uncomfortable, you have the power to help them. Go help them.
A quick shout out to the HubSpot Podcast Network for supporting Success Story. Now, if you like Success Story, you're going to love other podcasts in their network. One of my favorites is Create Like the Greats. It's hosted by Ross Simmons, obviously brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network. You're going to join Ross on Create Like the Greats. Ross dissects the genius behind history's most remarkable creators and their legendary work. So you're going to get this blend of history and business and creativity. He has a great voice, always good for a podcast, and he has a decade of practical experience. He's going to break down some of the best creative processes that built influential companies, brands, and stories in a way that anyone can apply. So whether or not you're fascinated by history, creative thinking, or you simply want to improve and systematize your own creativity without sacrificing productivity, this podcast is your perfect listen. Go listen to Create Like the Greats wherever you get your podcasts. A huge shout out to Lingoda for supporting today's episode. Now, if you're ready to master a new language, Lingoda is the online language platform trusted by over 100,000 students worldwide. Lingoda offers live classes with real teachers available 24/7. You can choose from German, English, business English, French, Spanish, or their newest edition, Italian. What sets Lingoda apart? The smallest class size in the market. It's just you and up to 5 other students. Or if you want, you can go one-on-one for personalized attention. Their native level teachers don't just teach language, they share culture too, and you'll speak confidently from day one. With Lingoda's flexible scheduling and proven curriculum, students report being able to navigate real conversations in weeks, not years. And if you're using Lingoda for business, their CEFR aligned courses ensure that you're learning internationally recognized language standards that employers value. Between sessions, you're going to reinforce your skills with downloadable materials and bite-sized practice exercises. And all Success Story listeners, they put together a special deal. Try Lingoda free with 3 group classes or 1 private class. Plus, you save on any course with my link, try.lingoda.com/successstory and code Scott25. Don't miss this chance to transform your life through language learning.
I love that. I think that this is something that has probably made you very successful. You're just a very human first, people first, relationship first leader.
I remember when that was me, and I was uncomfortable at that cocktail party. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know how to start a conversation. So the easiest way to do that is look for someone who's as uncomfortable as you are.
You don't even understand how, like, it seems so like such common sense though, but it's not.
You can learn it.
Yeah.
You can learn to overcome those things.
You know, this is why relationships are so important. I mean, relationships are what, and again, it's like that one-on-one relationship. It's everything you mentioned at the beginning. It's how the culture you want to influence. If you do it yourself, then the host that's greeting somebody at the door is going to do it as well. And then it's building one-on-one relationships with 100, 1,000, 10,000 people that come to a conference, or 10,000 or 100,000 customers. It's all about finding ways to build that one-on-one. I love it. Yeah. I've never heard somebody talk about like relationships like that, even though it should be discussed more, because business is relationships at the end of the day. And I think that actually it's going to become increasingly important. I'm just thinking about this as we were speaking, because I've heard you speak about AI and I think that right now we're in a period where people are over-indexing on AI and automation, and they're almost using it as an excuse to not focus on the human-to-human interaction.
Well, you're a tech guy. Tell me about the phenomenon of people having AI relationships.
I don't understand it. It's not real.
But if it feels real to them, I think it's a double-edged sword.
It was very sad. There was a kid who was, a suicide because of an AI relationship. So I don't think it's a positive for society.
I don't know yet. In its raw form, no. But what about, there's a company approached us probably a year ago, and they were building AI robots that they would put in a home of elderly people who live by themselves. I think that could have some positive potential, where they'd have conversation. They'd be reminded to take their meds, to stand up, to exercise, check, hey, did you fall? I got that on my iPhone the other day. Have you fallen? Should I call her? No, but that's interesting that technology is there.
Yeah. So you're right. There can be good application, but it has to be done thoughtfully and carefully. And I think that if you rush it and you say, oh, we have somebody that can, if I speak to it, it's going to speak back to me.
Well,
and you just deploy it.
Company here in town, Duolingo.
Yeah.
And that's an AI-based training, behavioral training, language technology. What if we could take these 10 chapters in Lodestar and develop a workshop that you can take and interact with that doesn't require a human on the other side of it, asking you questions, probing you, challenging you to think differently. George and I was just talking about this recently. That could be interesting. I don't know if the technology is there yet, but I bet it is.
It'll be there soon, if not already. But the second you, for example, say you have a whole customer support team. The second because I've experienced this, so the second you remove the human, and right now, today, in 2024, for example, you're replacing it with AI, that's immediately a turn off, unless the AI is useful. That's the thing.
Well, I think you're young. I would tell you that what we're finding is it's generational. Younger people oftentimes prefer non-human interaction. People my age, what do you mean I can't interact with a human? So it's very different in those 5-year increments of age.
That's so interesting. Oh, maybe I'm just an old soul.
No, you're a nice person. You're a Canadian.
Yeah, that's it. That's fine. So I just I found that most problems can easily be solved when it's like human to human. And you mentioned the thing about what you do at your conferences where you get people to, guide people around. And if they feel uncomfortable, you go up and talk to them. I think that's a beautiful touch. That's something that AI right now cannot do. That's something that AI cannot do. So I think that it is really important to invest in.
But it is identifying warning vocabulary.
What do you mean by that?
So there are AI tools now that can listen to someone's speech pattern and identify potential problems, depression, dependencies. So that might have some good clinical red flags.
I could see that.
That might be beneficial.
Tell me, okay, so one of the things that you work on right now is Smile Farms, and you're working on adults with disabilities. So maybe speak a little bit about, because I love your evolution, and now that you've branched out from, it's so interesting because you've branched out from small business owner to operator of large business to operator of many businesses to now you're actually back as, I guess, chairman, CEO of 1-800-Flowers? Or
I'm chairman and I'm temporary CEO.
Temporary CEO. So you've dabbled in all the different versions of entrepreneurship, and now you look at sort of the future and you're building something that helps people that have disabilities. So you've gone through sort of your own evolution and you've gone through multiple seasons of your own life. So think about building out Smile Farms. What purpose does it serve? How do you build something like that out properly so that it can still be a viable business? Because I see a lot of nonprofits and similar style businesses struggle because they don't know how to build a fundamental business around doing good and altruistic reasons. But then we can talk about how AI or technology can play into that as well. But I'm just curious how you see your own evolution and what you work on.
They're all related. There's a common thread here. It's when COVID hit and some people are working from home. I hated it. I'm a social animal. I need to be around other people. There's no question. My wife will confirm that I was miserable. But the story of Smile Farms is one where, so I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I have my youngest brother, 10 years my junior, who was the CEO of Flowers. He's still on the board there, but health issues, he had to step down. And I have 2 sisters, and my middle brother, Kevin, was born developmentally disabled. So that had a big impact on our lives, of course, on his life, but on our lives too. And we grew up seeing my parents, who didn't have a lot of means in those early days, struggle, because this is the dark ages on mental health, and there weren't a lot of programs. And so they'd convene in our community. They'd rent a church hall on a Saturday morning and invite other families who had kids with challenges to come. They'd put on a big pot of coffee. Unfortunately, they'd all be smoking cigarettes at the time, which is why they're not around anymore. But they'd all share, the kids could play in a safe environment. The other siblings would get to know other siblings who dealt with the same challenges. We weren't the only ones. It was a hardscrabble community, so people weren't always kind to people with disabilities. In fact, often not. So, but they sought out social connectivity, my parents, and taught us that it was our responsibility to take care of Kevin and to make sure he was protected and to make sure you helped other families who had similar needs. And they'd compare notes. Hey, I heard this school is developing a program over here. Maybe you can get your kid into that program, or there's a law pending that'll change. So it was their support group. And we learned the benefit of community, and we learned watching our parents do that. So Smile Farms, so Kevin, good news is he lives a wonderful agency started by a good friend of my brother and I. His name is Walter Stockton. And 45 years ago, he was teaching in college, and there was a place in New York called Willowbrook, which was a state hospital. And a reporter for ABC News named Gerardo Rivera did an expose on the horrors of the conditions in this state hospital, of how people with developmental disabilities were being abused there. So the governor at the time, the first Governor Cuomo, shut it down. Said, we're going to shut all these places.
What year was this?
This would be in the 70s.
So still not so recent, but recent enough that it shouldn't.
70s, 80s, yeah. 80s. Yep, 80s. Early 80s. And they're going to be cared for in their communities. Well, there really weren't services in the communities for them. But that changed the attitudes in this country about mental health and delivery of services. And Geraldo Rivera, with his undercover reporting, was the lit the fuse. And he created a foundation. And my friend Walter applied to the foundation and got a grant of $10,000. And he passed a hat in his local community on Long Island and said, hey, owner of the transmission shop, dentist, these people are being put out of there. A lot of them come from this community. Let's pass the hat, and I'll open up a group home. At least we can help 10 of them. And he did. Fast forward, they take care of 8,000 people a day. They have hundreds of group homes around Long Island. And we're fortunate enough that my brother Kevin lives in one of those group homes and has since 1994. And he's doing well. But 10 years ago, Walter called my brother Chris and I and said, your brother would be doing a lot better if I could find him some kind of a job in the community. Because he doesn't have enough to do. And, but frankly, I have hundreds of people like him who are in our group homes and our programs here, all of whom could use jobs in the community. And I can't find jobs for any of them. But I have an idea. Let's have dinner together. Bring your checkbook. And his idea was, why don't we buy this 5 acres that's available, build some greenhouses on it, and because you guys know this business, you know how to grow stuff, let's grow flowers and plants, and your florist will buy them from us, so we know we have a built-in market, and we'll create work. And my brother Kevin still works there at the original Smile Farms in Murchis, Long Island. And we have 36 people who work full-time there, all of whom have developmental disabilities. And the program's going great. But if we're going to be involved in something, we want to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
And we now
have always the entrepreneur at heart.
Well, if you're not growing, you're fading.
Yeah.
And so we have 13 campuses like that now, where we employ somewhere between 400 and 500 people full-time, a growing product. And now we're moving into hospitality too. So I ate at a wonderful restaurant in New York last night called Kraft. And Kraft is a restaurant owned by a famous chef who's on TV for He's been on TV 18 years on Iron Chef, Tom Colicchio. It's a fabulous restaurant. Tom now has about 8 of our people who work in his restaurant. They had one guy who was the best glass polisher in the world. He's the world's best wine glass polisher because he never wanted any hint of a spot on the glass. Everything had to be polished before it goes on the floor. And that fellow now was promoted about a year ago to work on the cooking line. And they have a team meeting every night at Kraft where the whole team gathers and whoever's the general manager explains, here's what we have tonight. We have these many people coming in. We have this many reservations. And here's our specials for tonight. Chef, what do we got here? And the whole team gathers. And our one guy, it was his first night going to be on the line. And he'd never spoken out to anybody in the place. He just quietly did his work. But that night he gave a little thank you. He was so proud that he had been promoted to be on the cook line that night. And my buddy tells me there wasn't a dry eye in the house. So we're starting to move now to train people to work in hospitality industries because we're always looking for people. And we just happen to have a few friends in the Long Island and New York area who are proprietors of restaurants and hotels that are saying, hey, if you can help me train people, I'll find jobs for them.
I mentioned something before. I don't know if you agree with it or not, but I've personally found, is my opinion, that many companies that support underprivileged, they're not run exceptionally well, like for profits. And I feel like they're always mismanaged. So when you build something like this, obviously successfully, what are the things that you take into consideration when you're serving this group of people so you can actually build a really good business that ultimately will end up serving this incredible group?
I think it's the same. It's all about relationships. You have to be creating value. You have to find a way to sustain it because you can't, look, we raise money for our charitable efforts, but our goal is to make each of them get to the point where they're self-sustaining so that we can open another because the need is enormous. 80% of adults with disabilities are unemployed. It's crazy. The good news is the tough employment environment that we've seen the last few years has caused more companies to say, hey, it's the right thing to do and it's a pragmatic thing to do if I can get people, because they tend to stay forever. So it's the tight employment situation has actually had a benefit, not enough, but some benefit on this disabled community because more and more people are realizing. There's a agency in New York now. It's a staffing agency that only employs people on the spectrum. And their superpower is that they find out what is this guy really good at. And they have this one guy, he told me the story a couple of years ago. He's unbelievably good at spatial recognition, which is very good for certain kinds of technologies. But he's most productive, he's frankly only productive from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. So they had to figure that out. It took a long time. But now they contract him out and he works from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Those 5 hours, he is unbelievably productive. And companies really value his skill because it helps them through some difficult issues. So it's happening. But I'll tell you, you're right. There's not enough good business management in the not-for-profit world. But this is amazing entrepreneurs in that world too. Walter Stockton, my buddy, I told you about, one of them. I'll tell you another one that I'm a huge fan of. I swear I don't talk to the person next to me on airplanes, but I can tell you about 10 friends I have because I sat next to them on an airplane. And one of them is a lady by the name of Monica Block. So this is probably coming up on 3 years ago, January, 3 years ago. I'm returning from California and flying to Atlanta. And it was a football playoff Sunday. And we had our little screens on the plane. Everyone's watching the football games, and they were a very exciting idea. And she said she's not a football fan, but everyone on the plane's watching the games, and she's getting into it. She tells me a story, young woman, but her husband had died that year. And what was her concern? Her concern was that her husband started a charity in Atlanta, and she was afraid that it wasn't going to keep on going because he wasn't around anymore. And we had already had Smile Farms up and running. So I said, well, why don't you put me in touch with the people who run it, and I'll introduce them to our Smile Farms team and our flowers teams. Maybe there's something we can do together. The name of the company is called First Step. It's a not-for-profit. But here's how they go about this. They focus on a community. So can you imagine if you had to horrible misfortune of being homeless. How do you get out of being homeless? How do you change that? Or you get a job. How do you get a job? Oftentimes don't have a phone, so you can't call and apply. And
You print a resume.
Print a resume. Are you kidding? You don't have anything to eat. How do you get showered so that if you show up to work, people aren't running around away from you because you stink? How do you get a shave? How do you get toiletries? So First Step Staffing, her husband, Monica's husband, created this in Atlanta. It's now spreading around the country, and they're getting inquiries all over the world because it's the only, I'm sure there are others, but it's the one I know that's successfully bending the curve on people with homelessness, other forms of disability, and people who previously were incarcerated who can't get a job. So they bought a staffing agency, they turned it into a not-for-profit, and they appended to it a social service component, social workers, clinicians, to help these people. So we have at Flowers and Harry and David, we have distribution centers around the country. Christmas is our busiest time for all of our gift baskets and our pears and our fruit baskets and our chocolate boxes. And so we have distribution centers around the country, and we had just built one in Atlanta. So I said, Monica, we're having trouble staffing our center here. We're apparently not in the right spot, but easy for people to get to. So she introduced me to First Step Staffing, and they're terrific people doing the good work because it's the right thing to do, but they run it like a business. And so right now we have 300 people working in our facility, routing our packages, getting them out to our customers for the holiday, and they're on time, and attendance performance is 94%. The rest of our population, not 94%. They're better, but they have coaches on site. They have facilities where they take the folks in the morning and they get them showered and they get them clothes. And I hear from them when I talk to the people who come through their program and are working for us, the word they use the most is dignity. You restored my dignity. I'm able to imagine working with this coach of me getting a place to be able to stay on my own. And, ours is seasonal work, so they're there with us for a few months. But they then have a few months under their belt, and they have a resume, and they have a track record, and they have credentials, and now they can go to get a job someplace else, or they can get back on their feet. And so you're right, they tend not to be the best managed organization in the world, but here's one that I think needs a big old light shown on it because I think they're doing great work.
What do you want? What would you wish people knew about this population of people in terms of workforce? Like some myths that you just want to dispel.
I think you've talked about it a couple of times already today, which is relationships, and work is a lot more than a paycheck. We can kid ourselves saying, "Oh, if I didn't need the money, I would never work." Maybe some people, maybe. But I told you I hated working from home for the few days that I did that because I'm a social animal. And I think most of us are. And so for my brother Kevin, my whole family is involved and has been involved in our business because we're florists. We need kids and relatives and uncles and aunts to help us. And while my dad had his own business, he worked for me at the holiday time because he wanted to see the rest of his family. My mother ran payroll. My younger brother was running a business, and my sisters are talented floral designers and shop managers. And so if it was a Valentine's Day, my father wanted to see the family. He was our best router of our drivers because he knew every address. He knew where everything went. But we get together after the holiday. So Mother's Day, we gather back at my house now. We gather back at my house now late in the day, like 5:30, 6 o'clock. And we have a caterer that we use, and he makes up some nice platters for us, and everyone gathers back there. We talk shop. We can't help it. He's just got done with his exhaustive holiday. And my brother Kevin was never a part of those conversations because he's the only one not in the business. Now he's part of the conversation. Now he's talking about, oh yeah, but I'm already planting the crop for the fall. We already put it up. We already started our field mums. He's in the conversation. The underlying point here, Scott, is work is a lot more than a paycheck. It's who we are. It's why we get up in the morning. It's about dignity. Yes, it's about a paycheck, but mostly it's social. There's a couple who approached me at a dinner we run in May after Mother's Day. That's a fundraiser for the organization that Walter Stockton runs on Long Island. It's now called Connection. And a couple came up to me to thank me for what my family and I do to help Connection and now Smile Farms. And I said, well, we don't really do that much anymore. It's running itself now. They said, well, let me tell you how it's impacted our lives. I had a daughter. They had 3 kids. One daughter was disabled. And she had aged out of school and therefore programs. And that's what happens with this population. They're done with school. There's nothing more for them to do. And if they don't have a job, if they're fortunate enough to have a family that they can live with, they start to deteriorate because they're not having social interaction. And they told me about their daughter that her brother and sister who were married and lived nearby started coming around less because she was annoying to be around. She was depressed and she was complaining all the time. And the father confessed to me that he was working late a couple of nights a week. Not that he had to, but he didn't want to be home for dinner. And they said, we approached Walter and they tested our daughter to see where her skill sets were. And she now works at Smile Farms. And they said, our lives have changed so much for the better. She's losing weight. Her health has improved. Her brother and sister are re-engaged with her because she's not miserable to be around anymore. And her whole life has turned around. They were going shopping the next day because the next week, mom and daughter were going shopping. There was a dance and she wanted to get a new outfit to go to the dance. And she was hoping that one of the guys she works with at Smile Farms would ask her to dance. Work is a lot more than a paycheck. It's also very, very social.
I love that. I think that's an important lesson when you're looking to hire people. I've never had this conversation before with anybody. When you're looking to hire people, I think at the very least, start to think about how you can give people in this community an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think that many people do give them.
Well, it has an impact on our workplace. Positive. Let me explain. So with Smile Farms, we depend a lot on volunteers. So we run fundraisers. We had a big dinner a couple of weeks ago in Manhattan in New York City. Big success. We had 45 1-800-Flowers team members who volunteered to work that gala. They're checking people in at the door. They're selling foodstuffs. They're working with our farmers on who's getting the Farmer of the Year. So they're taking their own time and their own effort. So they're giving their own time to volunteer to work at Smile Farms. Well, not everybody's going to do that. But those who do are special people. And oftentimes they'll bring a friend with them who doesn't work for us. And a few months later, I see that friend walking in our office. And I said, what are you doing here? I learned about your company and I heard there was an opening. I applied. I started here on Monday.
They like what you represent.
Yes. So it's self-selecting who wants to be a part of that environment, who's not comfortable. So when you come to apply for us and you go to our Cheryl's Cookies facility in Westerville, Ohio, and you come in and the first person you see is a receptionist who's in a wheelchair. It tells you something. You may not even register. Something's different here. And it may not be for you. So you may decide, I really don't want to, I'm not going to mail in that application after I filled it out. Or you might say, hey, this is the kind of place that I want to be. So it creates some kind of selection criteria. And for us, that's been a very positive.
Attracts the right people.
And their friends.
Yeah. I love it. Where can people get the book? I mean, we're going to put it in the show notes. So like the Amazon link, but.
So it came out just September 24th, hit the bestseller list the first week. I was very proud of that. Thank you. And it's available at all the Barnes & Noble stores, independent bookstores, and a place called Amazon you may have heard of.
Where else do you want to send people? Do you have socials that you like to connect with people on or website?
I post a lot of edited versions of our weekly newsletter, which is called Celebrations Pulse, which people can sign up for. And I post them on LinkedIn a lot too. I think LinkedIn is a good self-selecting audience of people. And it tickles me that that people read our stuff, listen to our stuff, and
That's a huge list, by the way. That's amazing. It's amazing.
yeah, I'm knocked out by it. But of course, I want it to be 20 million now.
Of course. Well, hopefully,
It's a genetic defect.
hopefully, yeah, exactly. Hopefully, a few will find it after listening. I think they will. Last thing I like to ask, I used to ask, what would you tell your younger self? But we've sort of gone through your journey. So I like to phrase it differently. I would ask, what would be a lesson that you want to leave with your kids?
I already talked about the one to be a host. But I think I've always been curious. And I think it's because of hanging around, being the oldest. So I was exposed more to adults than my siblings were because I was working with my dad. I was around him and his brothers and his mother. And so I was around adults a lot. And I just always been curious. And it's always benefited me, being curious. And I could be interviewing someone for a job, and sometimes you're 5 minutes into the interview, and you realize it's not a good fit. So you can be rude and end it after 6 minutes. Or you could say, this person has experiences and they've seen and learned things that I haven't. And what can I learn from them? How can I make this a focus group of one? So curiosity has always benefited me. So if there's anything, I'd encourage my kids to nurture their curiosity streak and feed it.